Ready. Good morning, everybody. How are you? This is Enrique from Spanish United. Um, this morning, I am introducing James Branch. He is one of my administrators from Spanish United of the Eastern chapter of the United States. Introduce yourself to the show, Spanish United. Welcome.
Gracias and buenos dias. I am James Branch. I'm grateful to be here today as part of Spanish United with Enrique. What I do for a living, I work making bricks at Old Castle. Work a lot of hours, but I'm looking forward to putting some time into community. I am Dominican and still learning to connect and to come back to my culture. I'm encouraging everybody else who is second generation, third generation to come back and connect with.
Excellent. So I wanted to ask you, James, how were you introduced to Spanish United? Like who, what, like how did you find out about the organization?
I was searching through Facebook groups. Um, I just had it, with assimilation
Mhm.
into the African American community, and I was, just remembering what my abuelo said about connecting back to roots, and I was looking to find something that was organization. A lot of stuff on Facebook is parodial or for comedy or about food when it comes to Spanish culture. Spanish United was the only group that caught my eye that seemed to be about infrastructure that was not just about a marginalized group.
Mhm. Okay.
When I say marginalized group, like more focused towards one Spanish group, so it's like Mexicans or just focused on Puerto Rican. It seemed to be inclusive of everyone. It's hard to find a Dominican group on Facebook.
Yes, yes. And it's very hard to find a Hispanic group anywhere that's inclusive of everybody. Usually, many Hispanic organizations and groups are divided into tribes, meaning that,
Hmm.
Mexican, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Dominican, etc. And there isn't any unity. And what people don't realize that in this country, tribalism doesn't exist. If you are of a Hispanic speaking background, you're Hispanic. Doesn't matter if you're from Mexico, Dominican Republic, or whatever. It's like your group, that's the same. And I believe that Spanish United's vision is to erase those labels and to unite everybody as one group, because Hispanics as a group in the United States are a very large minority. We would outnumber African Americans, Asians, and other minorities as a whole, like 10 to 1. So I think if all Hispanics get together as one group, we can definitely be a force to be reckoned with. So that's why I'm emphasizing on education, building community, working together, because I see that in the community, in the Hispanic community. I think we spoke about this before, that other ethnicities that have not been here for this long, have not been in America for this long, after a generation or even within a generation, they prosper. And Hispanics that have been here, forever, we're still where we were, where our ancestors came 100 years ago. I think that's something that needs to be changed, because if we don't, we're going to become like a third or fourth class citizens in this country. It's very disturbing.
Absolutely.
And what are things that you believe that can be done to improve to improve, um, not only in terms of civil rights, but also to improve the status of the Hispanic community? Like, what ideas do you have?
First thing is we have to start making our voice and our numbers known through the unification efforts. It starts with the youth, especially the college students. They're more likely to protest. They're more likely to voice their opinions, and they're the up and coming generation. One of the biggest things is you have a lot of second and third generation Hispanics like myself who are not familiar with the language, the culture, in, so we're intimidated, when we
Mhm.
come in. But they have to know you're still Hispanic, you're still one of us, and we have to bridge the gap between people who were born overseas from America to the people who were born in America. That's the biggest thing because it's numbers and unification. That's how you get things done in the American.
Mm.
In the American, if we don't show a unified front, what they do is they use the marginalization of the groups against each other. They like to see us fight each other.
Mhm. Mm. And
And we know that,
that's something that I see a lot.
yeah, like they use the Salvadorian Dominican gang are fighting each other right now. And another thing is the youth are going after the pop culture. Another thing, from my perspective, a lot of us, I have a lot of young relatives who have left the Hispanic culture because they don't know anything about it and have assimilated into this pop culture, the African American culture here in the United States. But then you have people that come in and you're clearly different. And what happens is when you lose yourself, you lose your voice. One
Mm.
other thing that I would suggest is with the police brutality that I've seen for a lot of us with the shooting, the randomization and how people do not, they're afraid to talk. They're afraid to talk because of status, because of education of their rights in this country. A lot of our young men, especially, have to be educated on legal rights and status and how to utilize the system to help themselves because they're the heads of household. We
Mm.
need programs to encourage young men who are going to the street in the pop culture over trying to go to college, trying to find something in the trade. We have to encourage them to develop, and we have to develop. We need to develop an arm as men for these young men to fall back on, like the older men did for us.
Mhm.
And we have to show them this. This is how this is who you're going to come to. This is who you're going to fall back on. And with your vision, I want that arm of men not to be marginalized. Where okay, well, you go to the Dominicans, you go to the Puerto Ricans. That's who your people are. You're not really Hispanic to us because what is Hispanic? Um, every group has its term of what is Spanish. What is Spanish to us? If you're not from my country, you don't eat my food, you don't walk like you're a stranger.
Mhm.
But if we can make that a united front of elders and men to fall back on, no matter what country you come from, what dialect you speak of Spanish, this is your community. These
Mm.
young men will see the strength in numbers and they will come to you. They will come to us and they will learn this is me.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I'm long winded. I get it honestly from mi abuelo.
Mm. Sí, yo creo que es muy importante am, poner ese, ¿cómo se dice en español? Poner ese empeño de tener orgullo hispano. Yo he notado a- aquí en los Estados Unidos que los hispanos que han nacido aquí, se criaron aquí, tienen vergüenza de identificarse como hispano, como otros razas que están aquí, que son de la India o de China. Ellos pueden estar aquí por 100 años, pero ellos se identifican como asiático y no se avergüenzan. Yo he dicho muchas veces que la comunidad asiática, por ejemplo, en este país, ellos invierten en sus comunidades poniendo centros de cultura, centros de idiomas para que los jóvenes y sus ciudadanos pueden tener su vínculo cultural con su cultura, para no perder esa cultura. Y yo creo que eso es algo que yo creo que debe de implementar en la comunidad hispana. Si nosotros podemos invertir en esos centros culturales en nuestras ciudades o nuestros vecindarios donde hay una mayoría hispana, eso puede ayudar mucho en los jóvenes a identificar con sus raíces cultura hispana y no ser presionado de asimilar a la cultura anglosajón o a la cultural americano. Yo creo que eso es muy importante.
That's exactly is the inclusion of like every ethnic group. You have to forgive me. I'm still learning. That's
No,
okay.
it's
I'm still
fine. Go ahead.
learning. I believe I understood some of what you were saying. Um, what you were saying is how we can include everyone from different ethnic backgrounds of the Hispanic culture. How we can get people to focus more on being of their ethnicity within the Hispanic culture and how to appreciate the greater Hispanic diaspora. And from my experience, there's a lot of younger Hispanics. You got the Latinx or Latina X
Mhm.
movement that is starting. They have to stop looking to pop culture because when they go into school, the majority of young Puerto Rican youth, Dominican youth, Cuban youth, even Mexican youth. Like I was in a car yesterday, parked next to a young Mexican man. So I'm listening to the Spanish music at first, and then he sees me. I got the Dominican flag in my vehicle, and he starts putting on hip hop and bobbing his head and looking at me. So I turn on the Spanish channels because I listen to my Spanish music. Even though I'm not as fluent in Spanish as I would like to be, I most of the time I listen to Spanish music because I grew up listening to Spanish music and Spanish food. When my grandfather, which I seldom saw, would speak, he would make you speak some words in Spanish. But I put on the Spanish music. The young man looked at me, shook his head, then he drove off like he was embarrassed. Now, these are some of your experiences when you're a person of color who happens to be Hispanic,
Mhm.
who is more African American looking or black looking. They don't know. I'll give you another example. We're in the stores. A lot of Dominicans down here in Delphi, Maryland, go shopping at places like Safeway, Aldi, and in our area is predominantly Hispanic, but you have different groups. So the
Mhm.
young lady that was waiting on us was Honduran. I could tell she was Honduran because she had on the flag on her vest and everything. And in Spanish, she's talking to like certain people that look like her, and then people who happen to be Hispanic, older, younger, who are black, mostly black looking. She's speaking in English. So it's like we don't know our people. The lady behind me was Dominicana. She put the bags on the conveyor belt with the groceries in it, not understanding anything. So the lady abruptly, rudely in Spanish and in English says, "You have to take the bags off the belt." So the lady speaks back in Spanish and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know." So then the lady just looks, stops, and immediately there is a conversation. "Oh, you speak Spanish." So this happens a lot of times. We are fighting with each other. We're bumping into each other, and we don't know who we are. We
Right.
don't know that this person is a relative. We don't know that this person is Hispanic. Then this gets bigger when you get into the violence with the youth.
Mhm.
A little bad experience, then all of a sudden you have a person that is three generations down that is surrounded by people that look like him, but they're not his culture. Then he gets frightened and he starts hanging and associating with them,
Mhm.
which becomes a game of I'm hiding my culture. I'm not gonna do certain things. Next thing you know, he's leaving the home, and he's rejecting what's going on at home with his culture. He's
Mhm.
hiding his ground, hiding his art, he's hiding his Spanish. So it's a form of self hate,
Mhm.
and then what we think Hispanic is in this country, which is not true, is the stereotype that all Hispanics are people who are olive complected or got the Indian looking eyes and straight black hair, and all of us are from Mexico, or the Puerto Ricans, that are more fair skinned. That's not the truth. That's not what Spanish is. It's an inclusion of people that look white with blonde hair and blue eyes, people that
Mhm.
look almost African, people that look Asian, people that are mulatto or mixed breed. You
Mhm.
have a different group. So that's one thing that I'm trying to encourage. And I'm going to let everybody know, hey, don't speak Spanish fluently, it's okay. There's a few administrators in our group that do not know Spanish. Come in, tell your story, learn the language. Just be honest, you
Mm,
know. And you don't have to speak Spanish. You don't have to look a certain way to be part of the greater Spanish community.
mm. And that's one of the things that I encourage with my movement is I try to get a lot of Hispanic people to share their personal stories of things that have happened to them. It doesn't necessarily have to be like with racial injustice. It could be economic injustice. It could be stories about how they struggle with self-identifying as Hispanic, especially if they live in a community where one culture is more dominant than the other. I want I want the people to speak because this is something that I see in the Hispanic community in general, that they're so passive aggressive that they could be constantly being kicked in the face, hit over the head with a hammer, and they just take it. And that's self-harm, that's self-destructive. And that's the reason why when things happen to us, it's like a shock. It doesn't mean that it's not happening. It just goes unreported. Like, let me give you an example. All of a sudden, you hear Asians being attacked and being racially abused by everybody. Um, Asians are a much smaller group than Hispanics. It's like, why is it that Asians people are fighting for them, people are standing up for them? I think all types of racial violence against any group of people is bad. But why is it that people are standing up for Asians but not for Hispanics? You know, think about it. It's like, why is this happening? And I think it's because, you know, we are just invisible. And I think part of it has to do, like you were saying, you have a lot of people that have an issue with their status. That's for one. Another issue is the language barrier. There's a lot of us that don't speak English. And three, we don't know our rights. So when people are left in ignorance, not because they want to be, but because of circumstances, that's where people get abused a lot. And that is something that I believe that needs to change because we cannot continue to allow our people to be pushed over under the bus and continue to be abused by everybody. It's not just by white people. Hispanics get abused by African Americans, by Asians,
Yeah,
by other
yeah,
other minorities, and it's not fair. I
right.
think I think it's wrong.
It is wrong.
And I'm fighting as much as I can to try to lobby to get changes enacted into the minority protection. Like, I want Hispanics to have minority protection, which we don't have. I also want to enact laws to increase hate crime laws for Hispanics. Like, let's say if someone attacks a Hispanic person, they cannot be just charged with assault or with robbery. If it was racially motivated, they should do an injunction to extend a hate crime law to punish its perpetrators because Hispanics are victims of hate crimes all the time. But for some reason, it's like nobody cares to fight for us. It's like I feel that us as a community, Hispanics fight for everybody else, but when we need people to fight for us, everybody is silent, and that needs to change.
Your numbers, we have a lot of numbers that are not represented. That's the biggest thing.
Mm,
I'm going to talk as an Afro Latino in here. Those of you who identify as Afro Latino, I just identify as Hispanic.
mm,
These numbers have to step up, okay? These numbers have to come out. You have to come out of the closet.
mm,
I'm out of the closet.
mm,
I'm going to tell you some experiences that you may have if you are listening to this podcast. once you are out of the closet. I came out of the closet like 7 years ago. It's you. One of the things that I've experienced when I put the flag in my car, when I started identifying outwardly as a Hispanic, when I started doing things that are, because I'm going to tell you, African American culture, this is from my experience, they know when you're not American. They know when there's something different. They're not dumb.
Mhm.
But some of them are racist. And
Mm.
they're gonna let you know, oh, you ain't my brother. It's something as simple as being a Jamaican. They discriminate against them, and they're not Hispanic.
Mhm.
They call them tree monkeys, island monkeys, and that's from the white supremacist culture that they've been inducted to in this country. Even the more militant ones that ascribe to being, what you call Afrocentric. What I
Mm.
would say is, when I came out of the closet, this is what I've gone when they heard me listening to my Spanish music, my Spanish hip hop, um, the flag in the window, and I was living in Temple Hills recently, which is a predominantly black area. We moved there only because of economical issues, because the greater DMV area, which is DC, Maryland, and Virginia, that's the area that I'm in.
Mm.
Pretty much the cost of living is so high that where I just moved to, most of your Spanish families were living on top of each other. We're living
Mhm.
like five families per house just to pay that rent. And what we are doing here, and it's a powerhouse, and you got to see it. It's beautiful with the Salvadoran and the Honduran and the Mexican. They're working construction jobs and they're buying every house up around us.
Mhm.
Like as soon as they see a house, they pound on it. But here's the problem: to pay the rent with the money that we are making, you have to live about five families per house or work about almost every single day, about 24 hours. And then some of you are on child support or whatever, and then the status issue. So a lot of us are working like 2 to 3 jobs. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people are not able to get out to speak. So that's where it has to fall on the younger people, because out of those households, we're pushing some people either into the trades or to college. So
Mm.
then when you have a young Hispanic youth that's at the University of Maryland, and on his back and on his shoulders is how hard my uncle is working, how hard my grandfather is working, how hard my mother and my father, and then I got relatives that are also in the street trying to hustle and make money because they don't want to do it that way. I'm the jewel and the prize of the family. Everything is on me. And disgrace is a big thing in the Hispanic community. You don't
Mm.
want to be disgraced.
Mm.
So some of my experiences is once they found out and identified that I was Hispanic, I did go through some racial issues where with white as well as black, where they start, okay, well, you're not really this or that, so I could deal with you accordingly. And that's the reason why you, if you are Afro Latino and you happen to have the appearance of being black, or you are Euro looking, European looking, more white,
Mhm.
like Franklin Munoz. There was a reason why I posted Franklin Munoz in on my timeline and in the group. He is Puerto Rican and white.
Mhm. Mhm.
You have to develop your culture, your identity, and come within this movement and build a background so that you can fall back on it. Because we're not represented. There is no one speaking up for us. Now I'm gonna share a story real quick about something that happened to me when I was 16 years old.
Sure, be my guest.
I was hanging out with a bunch of African American youth. We were running the streets. I used to do that. We were into some things we weren't supposed to be into. So we got pulled over. When we got pulled over, the cops looked at all my friends. They were racist. There was one black cop and three white cops.
Mhm.
We all got taken into detention. When we got taken into detention, they called their parents, they bailed them out. Guess who was still sitting in detention?
You.
I was sitting in detention because I have a situation with my birth certificate, which I didn't know about, which
Mm.
my parents did, that I can go back and forth. I could go to DR if I choose to. I could stay here. I never knew that. So then my status was in question. I also have a cousin that went through a similar thing. He actually was deported back to a country he never knew, never heard of, never spoke the language. That's basically a death sentence
Mhm.
or a sentence to poverty for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
So once my grandfather came and he was speaking enough of Spanish and he came, he got me, he told me, they sat me down and told me some things. That's when the discussion was had about you got to make a decision to come back to your culture and you got to stay in your culture. You got to leave this destructive culture alone because they're not going to do anything. They're home and they're with their benefits. But you don't know what I had to go through coming to this country. I had to go through a lot of things. I had to pay people and everything. I had to sell things.
Mhm.
So that's some of what you go through. That's when you find out and you learn things and you start identifying and you start, moving away from things. I couldn't hang with those young men anymore.
Mhm.
I couldn't deal with that. Just that quickly, I would have never saw my family again if my grandfather did not come with the documents and everything and talk to them and talk, and I'm going to leave that right there. That's one experience. I'll give you another experience with the dating.
Mhm.
You're going to be yourself. Okay, you're gonna be yourself in a relationship. You can only pretend, but for so long, to be someone that you're not,
Mhm.
because somewhere deep down inside, you want this person to accept who you are.
Mhm.
So
Correct.
I'm with an African American woman, and uh, didn't know she was that racist. She was talking about how much she hates Hispanics, and finally, one part of me snapped one day when she kept on referring to Spanish men as sexual predators, and because of an experience she had with one. And
Mhm.
I said, look, I am Hispanic, I'm Dominican. I don't want to hear this anymore. Then all of a sudden I was stick this, stick that, wet back this. And those are some experiences I've had with women and men
Wow.
who happen to be African American. Yes, at work. Um, a man that was an older African American gentleman. Because, I let them know, as soon as we start butting heads and everything, and he knew there was something different about me. He's like, you're not really, there's something different about you. You're culturally different. And I wasn't trying to prove that I was culturally different. I was trying to blend in for safety.
Mhm.
And then I finally just came out and explained to him, yes, I am Hispanic. I'm Dominican. We can get along with whites and we can get along with blacks. That's one thing he knows that was different.
Mhm.
We blend in.
Mhm.
We get attacked by both. A white man will talk to me all day and say racial things, and it doesn't bother me as much when it comes to him talking about blacks because I don't identify with that as much. Because in my home, we didn't really get into that type of stuff. They were more focused on working and taking care of what my
Right.
father would deal with. So this man, one day, I'm gonna tell you what was very disturbing to me, started being a little more discriminatory toward me, the older black man. And he bought Taco Bell for me and said something and it was cold and everything. Hey, I bought you a little something that you might like. So they're ignorant to what we are, you know, who we are. Taco Bell is not Spanish food.
Mhm.
It is disgusting and it's an insult. And then,
And it's
little other
processed.
things like, yeah, process and it kills you. And, I was called a Salvadorian by my supervisor and he's like, and all I was doing was saying, yeah, I talked to this lady at the bank so I get the appointment moved up. And he's like, oh, you threatened her because you wanted them MS-13s. So we often, as Hispanics, they look at the stereotypical cultures that are in the media, and you could be Puerto Rican, you could be Dominican, you could be Cuban, and what they'll do is, oh yeah, yeah, you're Mexican. Not a Mexican. Nothing against my Mexican brothers and sisters. I'm not Mexican. And then that turns into, oh, you hate Mexican. That's not true.
Mhm.
Identify me correctly. Nothing against the Mexican culture. I eat Mexican food. I do. Authentic Mexican food. My
Mhm.
stories, I could go on and on about things I've been through, trying to assimilate. I had to recently leave an all black church. That's the last of it, that because I can't go into all my stories. You get to know me and we talk as brothers. I'll tell you some more things, but we're gonna be working to get some stuff done. I had to leave an all black church, that I just happened to go to because my wife was associated. And all of a sudden, there was a prophecy about a brown cat that couldn't get into the building and died outside. Guess who the brown cat was?
No, who?
Me. It was symbolic of me.
Oh, oh,
Okay. I'm the brown cat. And not only that, I was assaulted.
wow.
That's why I left. I was slapped by the pastor. And I said, I walked out, I was singled out. And I'm going to tell you like it is. When you are different among Black cultures, they do know their culture, especially if they're from Africa, the Caribbean, especially if they're African American.
Mm,
They know when you're different. They know when you're different. This is some of the racial things. So I recently left this church. I've had a lot of bad experiences with white and Black. And I'm here to invite you, if you're in the middle somewhere, that's where we're always at as Hispanics. We go along with the Black movement because we want our voice to be heard. They're going through the same thing we're going through. At the end of the day, when they use your voice, all them Hispanics, they can take care of themselves. They're all right. They don't need our help. That's them. That's a brown thing. They hate us.
mm,
So where's our voice? Where
exactly.
is our voice? Who talks for us? Our women out here getting raped by white men, Black men, our children being abducted. You go to Walmart, the majority of the children that are missing. And I've felt like this since I started identifying, since I was, since I really started getting serious about this, because I'm getting my behind kicked by white Americans, by Black Americans. You know, most of the children are Hispanic.
Mm,
Most of them are Hispanic. And then in this pandemic, here's the biggest thing: a lot of men who were not doing construction, who were not working for themselves, are sitting at home, but they can't work because what they were doing, either you were a teacher that just started working again, or you was doing something else, and you can't work. So that's a serious thing. Is in our community, being able to work and provide for your family is a serious thing to a Hispanic man.
mm,
You're not seen as a man if you don't have on. And I'm gonna tell you what the old people in my family used to say: if you're not covered in dirt during the week and wearing a uniform on the way to the store, you didn't do what you were supposed to do for your family. They used to wear their uniforms all the time, and a lot of us do. We wear them outside of work, or a business suit. Smell like a cigar or whatever. You are not a man. So here's the thing: a lot of men are trying to provide for the family. The youth, they don't want to do it the way that Abuelo used to do it and Papa used to do it and the uncles used to do it. So they see that fast money out there. You know the fast money, Enrique, the
mm,
fast money.
mm,
And they look at it and they see the images on TV, and everything that's on TV is a Hispanic man is either violent, angry, or an extremely romantic man or whatever, or he's a drug dealer or a drug lord. So this is what the Hispanic youth are looking at. Okay, so this is what I am. I'm supposed to be crazy. I'm supposed to be a drug dealer. I'm supposed to be violent.
mm,
This is a lot better than pushing a mop or working at a construction site and dealing with rednecks yelling and screaming at you. Because a lot of times when we get on construction sites, we're bidding to get on those contracts, or we're working with men that are different cultures, and we're humble and quiet, and you work long hours. I've done that too. So they're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like you. I don't want to work myself into the ground. This culture looks like it's a lot funner, and I'm gonna go and associate with them, and they're making fun, fast money, and I'm cool.
mm,
Why do I want to work a whole bunch of hours so that he can go to school? Because you think I'm not the smart, I'm not the smart cousin.
mm.
No, I'm gonna go out here, mama, and I'm gonna go make $5,000 a day. I'm gonna come back here and pay rent. That's where your young men are going. So it's the
I
same
know.
mentality. See what I'm saying? I got a lot on my chest. I'm sorry I'm uploading. I'm
No, it's
sorry.
fine. It's
I
fine.
felt
That's the whole purpose of the podcast, that you could, voice your opinion.
they are looking at their families, the gangsters, and they're saying to themselves, the thugs, the young thugs, and they're saying the same thing that the older men are saying. It's the same ideal. It's the same culture. He's out here trying to provide for his family, not to just look cool. He's thinking about the status of his family. He's thinking about his mother who's afraid to go outside because she thinks INS ICE is coming. She thinks that the immigration is every time, and it was warnings like that. Or he's looking at how hard his grandfather has worked or how hard he has worked. And he's still saying, well, there's an easier way. Since I'm not the smart cousin and you're not going to put up the money for me to go to school, I'm going to do something to help the family. Or if it's not a noble young man, he's alienated and he's leaving the family and he's assimilating into the other culture.
Mm.
That's the dangerous thing. We have the numbers, Enrique. We have the numbers. But I'm inviting you out there who think, okay, I gotta see if I'm Spanish. I gotta see if I really have enough of it in me. All the Spanish, they raped and killed a lot of people. No, that's not Spanish. That's the Spaniards. Okay,
Mm.
Spaniard is a part of Spanish culture. There's also the Indian and African culture that makes up the Spanish race, the Spanish culture. Okay, we're a mixture of things. Or I don't speak enough Spanish. I don't know if I'll be. They're not going to treat because you've been marginalized and because these are people that are okay. I'm protected if I stay within my group. If I come out of my group, I might get in trouble. No, you're Hispanic. Come out here and be Hispanic. Come identify. Come out of the closet. Come
Exactly.
out of the closet.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
No, it's
I got a
fine.
little emotional. I've been through some things. I've seen some things. My cousin, no, I gotta say it. My cousin Romero mm, was gunned down in Chicago when I was 16. Same situation. I'm gonna take care of my familiar. I want to take care of my family. And my cousin Romero was gunned down during a time when you didn't have cell phones.
Mm.
You had to do everything on pagers. He was living in his car. And he was living in his car because my aunt put him out. The reason why my aunt put him out, and I'm going to get there, but his father was African American, and he was too black. Because the women sometimes they go through changes where, especially in the Dominican culture, where you're too black, and that's only because she was mad at his father, and he was living in his car, and he was selling drugs, and he was bringing that money back into the household. Because when she moved on to my uncle, my late uncle Joseph, who was more Latino,
Mm.
there was beef with him and there. My little cousins, the children that he had with her, were allowed to stay. Those are some of the things that happened. But he was out in the streets and he was there and he ran into some corruption and everything. They gunned him down. As he was gunned down, his pagers were still going off and they found his body. Those are some of the things that I've seen since I was a young man. And then there was a warning given by my grandfather. He was like, that's what happens when you lose your way. You cannot lose your way. I
That's
want to
very
say this.
true.
I believe that you may be the reincarnation of Henry Quillo, who was a cacique. I might be saying it right. He was a Taino chief
Mm.
who went against the Encomienda system. He went against the Encomienda system, which was exploiting the Taino Arawak Indians under the Spanish. I
Mm.
believe that we might all be the descendants of the cacique or the chiefs, and we just came back in this generation to come together and make change. And there, if you look at the Palenques, Quilombos, the little villages where we resisted
Mm.
against against Spaniard, the Spaniard conquistadors, and how we came together and we sustained ourselves, you might find your purpose. But I do believe that those palenques, those villages, those safe havens, where a lot of Taino Indians went, where a lot of African slaves ran to, where a lot of poor Spanish Criollos, Criollos who have migrated from Spain, but they were poor. They went to go find refuge. So this is how a lot of us became who we are. In those palenques, in those villages where they were resisting being conquered,
Mm.
they found their identity. And those identities were passed down into Dominican culture, Puerto Rican culture, Cubano culture, all the, because we kept a lot of those things. We kept a lot of those things. have to also remember that in some of the places where we are from, they used African slaves and Indian slaves to mine, to be mining, to mine gold, to mine metals out of the earth. And that was a situation where they would bring someone in, they knew they were going to live for 3 years because of how harsh it was. Sugarcane, we'll go to sugarcane. Sugarcane was basically like what I do every single day. It was a process, and you had to manufacture the sugarcane in a certain time limit. If you didn't, the sugarcane would go bad. So there were harsh punishments done when the sugarcane would go bad. Like they would crush it and cut people's hands off. They would boil them alive in the sugarcane juice. So I'm talking to you, if you're of African descent and you identify as Spanish, yeah, the Spanish culture is more than what you think it is. It's more than what you think it is. We are Spanish. Yes, we are. It's not just somebody that looks Mexican. It's not just somebody that looks like my brother on this podcast. It is you. You are Spanish. Those are my experiences, some of them. I'm not going to get all into it because I don't want to take away from the message of Enrique. One of the things I suggest so that we can provide refuge for the youth is nothing we do is not going to work unless we become the palenques, the villages that these young men and women can run to find refuge. We have to start being the arm, the branch. We got to show them something. We got to mentor them. We got to take them under our wing, the youth. We got to show them, hey, yeah, you don't know how much you've been to come here. Another thing I want to add is slavery was not about color where I'm from. It was about class. It had nothing to do with color because I'm going to tell you a story. One thing about Spanish people, my fathers would say, is we love telling stories. That's one of the things that we do. It's a shaman kind of principle. We love stories. That's what brings the family together. A long time ago, the Spaniards were here. And when they came here, they were so busy chasing women all the way down to Venezuela, from all the way up from Hispaniola, all the way down from Mexico, all the way down to Brazil, and chasing gold and the elusive fountain of life and whatever myth they could come up with. And they were drunkards and they were rapists. That's true, the Spaniards. To the point that the Spanish crown from Spain was concerned. And they were looking over here in the Americas. And they were saying, the British are over here and they're getting ready to take what's ours. Not only the British, the Dutch, the Portuguese,
the French.
So then the French, yes, the French, all of them. And they were looking at these people who were colonizers as well and competitors who were getting ready to take over the other side of Hispaniola. And they wanted to have everything. So they were like, okay, well, this person, they couldn't afford to do things according to the color of your skin. Well, I have a mulatto who's a descendant of Mr. Cortez, who has just ran off to go look for the fountain of life or youth or whatever. And he's here. And he can read, he can write, and he's been running this estate for 10 years. I think I'm going to allow these men to be subjects to the crown so that I can hold my foot over there in the Caribbean. I can hold my foot over there in Central America. So that's how a lot of mestizos, who are people who are Indian and Spanish, and mulattoes, people who are of African descent and Spanish descent, that's how a lot of us ended up becoming the lords of the land. So it was not about class. It was not about race. It was about class.
Of
It was
course.
about class. It's not a color. The culture of a color. Culture of a color. Some of you who are in the Black Lives Movement or are more Afrocentric or whatever, we're not against it at all. They can do what they need to do. We're just trying to focus on what we need to focus on. We have to be there for our own. What I'm going to explain to you is you may be running around thinking slavery, slavery, slavery. They did this to me, slavery, slavery. But then if you come into your Spanish culture like I did, you come to find out that a lot of your fathers owned property, owned slaves. And then you may end up finding out some other stuff. That's why it's very important that you learn these things.
I agree with
Very
you.
important that you learn these.
I agree with you, and especially someone like myself that comes from a background of history. You know, my background is in education. One thing is that I encourage my students to do is to research, to investigate, and to use critical thinking and to look at all of the information that they have before them, question, and at the same time come up with their own conclusions using facts and evidence, because that's something that's very important. You know, that's, you know, something that I think is lacking, that people tend to go by what people tell them, but they don't take the time to investigate for themselves. And I think that's very important, that people really need to, you know, look at the history, investigate, and then come up with their own conclusions on taking what is true from what isn't.
We are encouraging, and I'm going to use this term. I don't want to use this term. These two terms, we're against these terms. One thing in Spanish United that we do not do, we don't encourage people to use the N word or the V
Mm,
word. I'm going to
mm,
say it like that because I
mm,
will not say those two words. The V word is supposed to represent a man that is loca cabeza, crazy,
mm,
could pop off at any minute. And then when you talk about the V word for a woman, it's supposed to be a woman that owes a man money, so she's a prostitute. And in the Spanish culture, for the youth around my time, we were using those words a lot. So when you was listening to the hip hop, those two words, and then the N word, the same thing. It's pretty much the same thing.
mm.
See, when you speak a word over yourself, it becomes an energy, and then you begin to embody the energy. That's something that we got to be aware of. I'd rather call you a chief. I'd rather call you a shaman than to use those two words because there's power in those two words.
Oh
One
yeah,
other thing,
absolutely.
one other thing that I would say, I'll give you a little history of DR. At the time of the revolution, there was a revolution in Haiti, and it was a man named Toussaint Louverture. I think I said his name right.
Yeah, that's a French name.
And he went off, and he was an educated man. He could read. Education, there you go. And they went off on the French. They got the French out of there. So the whole island was independent. Then there was a portion of the island that was Spanish. That's my country.
Mm,
So during the Haitian Revolution, they were pro-black, and they wanted everybody to identify as such. So somehow we all ended up being included into that. And then later on, we had to fight for our independence because they were killing us
mm.
and everything because they saw us as traitors to their movement. The other things that I do know about the culture back home in DR is there's a lot of talk that we hate Haitians. It's not true. That is not true. I'm going to bridge the gap on that. Haitians are actually considered to be Latino. That's something you all got to know. They're Latino. They're not Hispanic. The reason why they are Latino is because they come from the Romance languages, French,
Mm,
the French Creole, Italian. They're non-Hispanic Latinos. Brazilians are non-Hispanic Latinos.
mm,
What makes you a Hispanic is you descend or you speak the Spanish language
mm,
or you have Spanish background. That's what makes you Hispanic. You're also Latino. I'm Latino and Hispanic
mm,
because I come from the Romance languages because Spanish is a Romance language. Okay, it is a Romance culture.
mm.
So we got to be careful when we identify what is Latino, what is not, what is Hispanic. Now in America, we use these two terms interchangeably without discriminatory, and we use it just to use it when we're referring to a person of color who looks Hispanic or speaks Spanish. So a lot of groups that are coming here, like Brazilians, people from Haiti, people from various cultures, like even Argentina, because they were ruled by the Italians.
Mm.
That's one thing I do know. They were ruled by the Italians. they would be considered Latino, the ones that are not Hispanic.
Right. Same thing with
They,
Uruguay. Same thing with Uruguay
that's probably why you excluded Uruguay and Uruguay and
and Chile.
Venezuela
No, no, I said
and Chile.
Argentina. I said Argentina, Uruguay,
Argent-
and Chile.
Argentina, Uruguay, and Chile, because those are three that are mostly either Portuguese or Italian. What I understand.
Well, yeah, those countries are the most European of all of the Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America, because there wasn't any mixture. They never took slaves to those countries, and the natives that were there, they were all eliminated. So there was no fusion of the African, Spanish, and native like you see in other countries in Latin America. So those
Right, like
countries are
our lesson.
right. So they're going to identify more with the European culture.
That would explain why the Nazis after World War II were fleeing down there.
Well, yeah, because remember, it was not only Spanish and Italian immigrants that went to Argentina, and this was before the Second World War. Argentina, like the United States, centuries ago, was a nation of immigrants, and a lot of Europeans from Germany, from Austria, from Eastern Europe settled in Argentina in large numbers. So a lot of people don't know this, but in Argentina there were actually enclaves in the country where even though they speak Spanish, they've been there forever, they still speak the language of their ancestors as a second language. You know, and that's the reason why a lot of Nazi and fascist Italians, from Mussolini, settled in Argentina because they were able to find kinship with those countries. At the same time, it was easier for them to escape prosecution from the Allies because remember, after the war, Africa and many parts of Asia were still under European control of the Allies, but most of the Americas were independent. So that's the reason why many Nazi and fascist war criminals from Germany and Italy, fled to South America, primarily like to Argentina and to Uruguay to to Chile. I've seen documentaries.
They were basically going home.
Exactly.
um, for you, those of you out there, I don't care what background you hail from, okay, in the Spanish diaspora, I want you to look up these names. Ganga Zumba, Zumbi dos Palmares. That's from Brazil. I love Brazilian culture. I read a lot about it. I encourage everyone in here to sponsor a country. This is going to be part of Spanish United or Espanol Unidos. I think I said it right.
Yeah, it's fine. You said it correctly.
Espanol Unidos. Sponsor a country. Go back into its history, learn its foods, use its products, learn about its heroes, learn about what happened in the history. And I say we should do this at least every 3 months. Sponsor a country, sponsor a culture, get to know the people in your area that are from that culture. Try talking to them and tell them, I would like to learn more about your language. I would like to learn more about you. Like you can go to the grocery store and find people. Because I go to like Best Way around the corner, which is an international place owned by Chinese people. And it's mostly our people working it though.
Right.
For our people, it's overpriced. You can bump into people and you can talk to them, start a conversation. We're very friendly people. We will talk to you and at least try to share things. You can ask little things. And if you sponsor a country and get to know what's going on with that country and get to know what's going on with that culture, that will unite us. So, okay, I'm Puerto Rican. I'm going to learn a little bit more about the Dominican Republic. I'm picking on me and Enrique right now, naturally. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna talk to Enrique, and I'm gonna get to know more about Puerto Rico and what they went through. What are their current issues? What are some things that I can do to help? And then that way you become closer and you become a Puerto Rican that knows more about the Dominican culture. All of a sudden, that's a gap that is bridged. So as administrators and people who are members of Spanish United, here's one of my ideas. Embrace a culture other than your own. Now I'm gonna pick on you Puerto Ricans and the Puerto Ricanos. Man, y'all the most flag waving people I've ever met. They got a flag on every bumper sticker and everything. So go ahead and go outside the culture, and you guys are the banner carriers. You're leading the cause. The Puerto Ricans are the most outspoken people in the Spanish movement that want to even seek to have a little more autonomy from the U.S. Because the U.S. and how they dealt with everything during the flood and everything, the hurricanes during the Trump administration, it was very, very much just disgusting. But you guys are leading the cause. You're very vocal like the African Americans. That's one thing I love about the Puerto Rican culture. But what I encourage, especially Puerto Rican culture, since you're leading the cause, you got to bridge the gap. Every 3 months, put a flag up on your page that's not yours, that is of your Spanish brother or Latino brother's culture. Because after we get to bridging the gap between the Spanish cultures, we got to also bridge the gap between the Latino culture.
Like the Italians, Portuguese, and French.
Yes, exactly. You put us all together, it, you cannot break us. A union, a Latino union.
That is something that I would love to see in the near future.
Do you understand that a lot of us believe in reincarnation, which comes from the old ancient African and Indian cultures that we also descend from? We did this before in another lifetime. I'm going to also get spiritual with you. I'm going to let you know it's not just education. I'm not to step on anybody's toes who are Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Mormon. I'm going to get spiritual with you. And then some of you deal with the other stuff. I'm not going to get into that because it's a little more controversial. We did this before. Those people that you're going to learn about, you go to these countries and you open the book in Brazil, you open the book in Venezuela, you open the book in Mexico, you open the book in El Salvador. You're going to see those heroes, Black, Spanish, or Indian. And you're going to learn and you're going to might find yourself. That's who I was in that lifetime. I did that. So what is your purpose in this lifetime? What is your purpose in this lifetime? Who are you? Is it just to go to work for somebody else, work from 9 to 5 and come home tired with your feet sore, covered in sweat, and then come back to do it again? I get up at 3 in the morning, every single morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, every single morning. I get home about 6 o'clock, sometimes 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, sometimes 5. My focuses are now going to be more on this because I have 4 children. My eldest is 18. His name is Samuel. He's graduating. I have to talk to him all the time about his identity because his mother's white. So I have to bridge the gap for him, and I'm all he has when it comes to culture.
Mm.
I have 3 children. 3 children with a woman who is also Spanish descent. She's Filipino and Hawaiian. And then I'm Dominican, so I got to bridge the gap with them as well. So I got 4 beautiful children, and then I have 3 stepchildren who are Jamaican that I teach Spanish to because we live in a predominant Spanish community. So I got altogether 7 children. And one thing I would jokingly joke about, we are some fruitful people. That's that's one thing that they had never lied about that. We make babies. Okay, that's why we're one of the largest minority groups. So what do you do with all these children? You gotta teach them. And the reason why we make so many children is because we're still in the village mind frame, even generations away from the farmers and the people that work the land. You have big families so that they can work the land. Now you're here in a place where you got to fit all these big families into a small house or 2 small houses or 3 small houses. So it's a little different. So we go out to the factory, we go out to the construction site, the grocery store, the restaurant, for those of you who are just starting out. But you have to remember the youth because the youth, they see you working hard. But when we look at communities, like my brother posted, he posted the Asian community as well as the Spanish community, and the 2 neighborhoods look very different.
Mm.
Both cultures work very hard. The only difference between the two cultures is one culture is pushing the youth into education. The other culture is just working hard and hoping somebody comes out and ends up being the prodigal son. No, not the prodigal son, the child that stands out. Oh, this is the child that's going to change everything. That happens all the time. Then that child goes to school. Now I'm going to talk from the other perspective. We didn't talk about the people in the barrio, the people that run the streets. We didn't talk about them, the ghetto. Now we're going to talk about the other perspective. The college and high school dropout. There it is. All the pressure of the whole family is on that one child. That one child. They go to school and they're surrounded by white classmates. They are partying. Mommy and daddy, they could go liquidate an account to make sure you're still in school. They could go pay off a professor to make sure you pass. Not him. If you mess up that money, that's 6 years of somebody working 3 jobs, 4 jobs, working themselves into the bone. You just ran through that. Then you come home. You done dropped out of college and you got an answer to that person. That's almost as bad as being deported because you was a drug dealer. So then they end up being marginalized and they have to figure out, I'm going to live. I'm going to work. Can't go back to school because all that money's gone. So we got to reach them too.
Oh,
Figure out how to
absolutely.
make,
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was a very insightful perspective that you gave. I really appreciate it. Uh, I'm so glad that we had this conversation. You know, this is the whole point of these podcasts is to get to know the administrators, to get to know the people that are part of Spanish United, hear their voices, and at the same time to reach out to a wider audience. I really appreciate you being on the show.
I want to thank you, Enrique, for your vision. I still believe that you're the reincarnation of Enrique Quillo, and you did great things in that life, and you're going to do great things in this life. I'm getting ready to hit the ground running. I'm going to get this chapter going. We have to do something. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. It's a pleasure, and I really appreciate you being on the show. So as soon as I wrap things up, I will definitely send you the link to the podcast, and I'll inbox it to you, and I'll send it to the group.
What say Dios te bendiga?
Igualmente, y gracias por tu tiempo.
De nada.
Have yourself a wonderful day.
You as well.
Bye bye.